Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for coming. So what I'm going to be talking today, it's about one of the main research lines in my lab back in Barcelona, which is mostly about island evolution and trying to understand what are the main drivers of diversification. We've been working with different groups, so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to give some general ideas about island evolution, and then I'm going to give you some examples of some of the answers we have obtained out of this, trying to answer some of these questions. Okay, so I always like to start with this sentence by Ernst Mayr, which I think it actually conveys very well, very nicely, what islands are for evolutionary biologists. Okay, so this is the idea that islands are our experimental sample, or experimental designs in order to understand speciation and to understand diversification. So it's this idea, that if evolutionary biologists could have an experiment, that would be an island. Okay, and the reason for that is that islands have all the virtues, all the traits, all the features of an experiment. Okay, they have well-defined boundaries. They're usually small. I mean, relatively speaking, but usually ecosystems in islands are much more simpler than they are in the continent. The history is a little bit more simpler. The nice thing, especially when you're working in oceanic islands, is that you may have an idea when everything started on this island. You may know when this island actually started to evolve. And one of the most interesting things for me is that they are independent replicates of evolution. So each oceanic island is an independent replicate of evolution. And actually, that gives you a lot of chances, to test hypotheses about, for example, convergence in evolution. So, there are different kinds of islands, of isolated ecosystems. Basically, you can distinguish between the fragment or the continental islands and, what we call the Darwinian or the oceanic islands. So most of my talk is about these guys over here. So these are islands that just started de novo. Most of the times they are the result of volcanic eruptions. So basically, they started. They have like a very specific moment in time when the island emerged. And then basically we have like a maximum date for anything that happened in this island. Okay, and this is actually a very nice feature when you try to understand evolution. So when we talk about evolution on islands, there are certain processes, that are kind of like paradigmatic in these islands, and features, that we can actually link islands to this kind of ecological and evolutionary features, like impoverishment. That means most of the times, the diversity, the number of organisms or the number of species in an island is less than in the continent. We're taking into account the same surface. And usually they are disharmonic, what means that basically if you compare the island with the continent nearby, the composition of species could be completely different, okay? Because actually it has nothing to do with how successful a species is in a continent, the fact that this species is going to be in the island. It may have to be with dispersal ability, for example, okay? So that means that the ecosystems in islands may be very different from the ones on the continent. And then another typical feature of islands is adaptive radiation. So most of what we're going to be talking today is about adaptive radiation. I want to try to define what adaptive radiation is, what are our expectations, how can we actually test some of these predictions, and also how adaptive radiation relates to mechanisms of speciation. Because I think there are some misunderstandings about adaptive radiations and speciation. Okay, so what are adaptive radiations? And the funny thing is that when you look in the literature, there's a lot of disagreement about what would be like what would be the requirements to classify a particular evolutionary process as an adaptive radiation. And I would say that most of the consensus comes from these two particular features over here. So we probably must agree that an adaptive radiation involves species proliferation, so you have a bunch of species, okay? And also, that would be the other expectation. There you have a lot of ecophenotypic change. So basically, you're in a place where you have a lot of different species, closely related, so they have like common ancestor, and they mostly differ by kind of ecological or phenotypic adaptations. So these are the expectations. That would be like the main feature, to define a particular evolutionary process as an adaptive radiation. Some authors will claim that also there has to be some kind of like of time constraint on that, meaning that it has to be rapid, it has to be fast, it has to happen very fast. Not everybody agrees with that. Actually, there's some years ago, there was a meeting between some of the big people in studying evolution on islands, and actually they could not agree with include this particular trait as a definition of adaptive radiation. But anyway, let's not put that as well. So it has to be fast. And then the other thing, which is not exactly something that defines an adaptive radiation, but I think it's something that sometimes characterizes adaptive radiation. I think it's very interesting from an evolutionary point of view, which is parallel evolution. That means the evolution of similar phenotypes, of similar adaptations independently within one particular adaptive radiation. And this is kind of neat because, as we will see afterwards, one of the nice things that actually these island systems provide is a way to test, parallel or convergence in evolution. Okay, so why adaptive radiations happen? So the common knowledge will say that that's because of ecological opportunity. Okay. And these would be like the three main reasons, or the three main situations where actually you're going to have all these ecological opportunity. And this actually comes from Simpson, which was one of the guys that was he was a paleontologist, he was part of the evolutionary synthesis, and he gave this more like macroevolutionary perspective of the evolutionary synthesis. So basically, you may have ecological opportunities when you colonize a new area, okay? You get to a new area. So, all the ecological constraints you had before kind of like relax. The interactions are different. Maybe there are less competitors. There are more resources. For whatever reason, you have a lot of new opportunities by colonizing this new area. And this is basically what happens when, a new species, a new propagulus arrive to an island, okay? New opportunities. It may also has to do with the fact that, a particular component of the ecosystem is removed for whatever reason, okay? You mentioned it, some kind of like environmental, disaster or whatever reason. A new space opens, and then, there's a new opportunity for the people who is left there. And basically, and the last one is the evolution of key innovations, the evolution of new characters that allow you, to exploit a new resource. So that would be the main reasons for, let's say, opportunities for adaptive radiation to happen. And that was going back to the fact of the parallel evolution. Probably most of you know this book by Stephen Jay Gould, The Wonderful Life. In this book, he proposed this idea that if we could play evolution again, the tape of evolution, of life again, would evolution go through the same ways? We will recover again the same kind of ecosystems we have nowadays? His answer was no. But whatever the reason, islands provide a way to test us. Because I was saying before, because each island, oceanic island, is an independent island. Independent example of evolution. We can actually test if that actually happens. If evolution kind of replicates itself. And this is a very nice paper by Mahler and collaborators on the Caribbean and all these lizards, where they actually show, this is kind of, that would be like the phylogeny. Is that working? Okay. That would be the phylogeny. These are the biogeographic distribution of some of the species. This is kind of like the morphospace representation using PCA. And basically the idea is that, similar morphotypes appear independently in different islands. And within one single island, you may have a repetition of all these different morphotypes that they evolve independently in each island. So this is kind of neat. Okay, so talking about adaptive radiations, and I was introducing this topic by saying that I think there's some misunderstandings when we talk about adaptive radiations, and it's the fact that up to what point diversification is linked to speciation. Because there's some people that tends to think that when you have adaptive radiation, you have some kind of ecological speciation. Okay, so the speciation, the driver of speciation, the mechanism of speciation could be something related with adaptation, with ecological adaptation. The truth is that it's not always the case, and my argument today would be that most of the times it's not. Speciation. Speciation is not related with ecology. It's not related with adaptation. Adaptation is post-speciational. Okay? But anyway, let's not put this situation. That's a proposal by Schluter and collaborators, saying that there's a link between diversification and speciation. So speciation is mostly due to ecological speciation. But the thing is that we may also have diversification, like ecophenotypic diversification, but not being related with speciation at all. Okay? So we'll have adaptive radiations with non-ecological speciation, and we may even have non-adaptive radiations, things that you have a proliferation of species, but it is not exactly adaptive. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to give you some examples of groups that we have been working with that we fulfill some of these expectations, and kind of like show that the whole process of adaptive adaptation, it's kind of idiosyncratic, let's say. Okay, so basically we have these mechanisms of speciation, the ecological one, which basically means that the whole process is driven by natural selection. Okay, so natural selection is the main responsible for having this kind of like a reduction or of gene flow. Let's go put it in a very general way. It could be gene flow, it could be demographic exchangeability. There's something that kind of like severs the communication between the different populations. In this case, could be the effect of natural selection, maybe because you're adapting to different resources. Okay, and these different resources are responsible for the reduction in gene flow. But on the other hand, we may also have mechanisms, like maybe more classic mechanisms of speciation that has nothing to do with ecology. Okay, things like allopatry. When we are within an island, we will be talking about microallopatry, but that's just a problem of scale. But we may also have other processes that are important, like sexual selection, for example, or chromosomal rearrangements. Okay. Okay, so this is basically the introduction of the ideas I wanted to talk about, and then this is my favorite group of organisms, and my only expectation in this talk is that people leaving this room, they're going to love spiders by the time I finish. Okay. Well, at least I convince you the spiders are important. So why talking about spiders when we talk about islands? Well, that's because, spiders are among the first colonizers of islands. Have you heard probably about the Krakatoa? This island that just blew up, like at the end of the 19th century. So the whole island blew up. So everything was killed in the island. 5 years after that, Krakatoa is in Indonesia. 5 years after that, or I don't know how many years, some naturalists go to the island and start collecting whatever there is there. First thing they collect is a spider. And the reason for that is that the spiders are among the best dispersal organisms in terrestrial habitats. Okay? Most spiders are able to do what we call ballooning, which is basically, these are immatures of a ligniphyte, one of the family of spiders. They go at the tip of a plant. They kind of like do a movement called tiptoe, which is basically putting your ass up. And then they just produce this silk thread, and they are blown away. Okay? Actually, there are some people who just actually sampling what we call the plankton, the air plankton, things that are like floating in the air with planes. Most of the things floating in the air turn out to be immature juvenile spiders. Okay, so they do a pretty good job colonizing islands. So this is one of the reasons to work with spiders when you're interested in island evolution. So what are the spiders? Well, spiders are the most amazing animals on Earth, as everybody knows. This is a very old group. We're talking about guys that evolved 350 million years ago, about the same time that most of the insects were diversifying. This is an independent colonization of land. That means that it gives a lot of opportunities to understand terrestrialization in a group which is different from insects or vertebrates. It is mega diverse. Right now we have about 46,000 species of spiders identified. It's about 100 families. And they are fundamental for ecosystem functioning. These are the most abundant and diverse top predators in terrestrial ecosystems. Okay? So at the mesoscale, they are regulating all the food webs in the ecosystem. And they have an impact on human societies. So basically, mostly because of silk, for engineering, and because of venom for medical, for health, and some neurophysiology studies. But also for agrosystems. Problem with the spiders is that for some reason that I cannot understand, there's a lot of people that hate spiders. And this is actually something very interesting that that shows you to what level people is afraid of spiders. So these are the two news in two different newspapers, Periódico, The Guardian. And it's the same news. This is a paper that was published a couple of years ago, 1 year ago, which basically was demonstrating that spiders ate like something ridiculous, 400 metric tons of insects every year. Okay. So the nice thing of this study is that they're fundamental for agrosystems, for example. I mean, if we didn't have the spiders, we wouldn't be able to have any kind of crop. They will be eaten by insects. The Periódico decided that there's another way around that, which is basically that the spiders could eat everybody, because we have the same amount of biomass than the insects. So anyway, I wouldn't trust the Periódico anyway. I would go for The Guardian. But Okay, so we're talking about spiders and islands, and I was telling you about some of the patterns of the general ecological patterns and islands. And just to give you an example, this is what we know about Hawaiian spiders. So you know, Hawaii is one of the most remote archipelagos, so it's a good test example, you know, to try to figure out some of these patterns. So just for you to have an idea of, you know, we're talking about impoverishment, you know, how depopulated are island ecosystems compared with the continent. So look at that. I mean, in Hawaii, we only have 12% of the world families represented, okay? Which means that only 12% of the families were able to make it to Hawaii. Well, Hawaii is very far away. It's 4,000 kilometers from the nearest continental area. And in this here, we have the list of families. It doesn't matter. You have the number of genera here. I mean, the only point here is that you can see that some of the spiders, some of the families, and this is not a clear pattern of kind of like ecological role, but some of them were able to arrive and also to diversify within this island. Okay? That would be the potential cases, like some genus of Lineae that has about 13 species, because it's about 11 species. This one particular genus, Tetragnatha, has 60 endemic species, or Chemisids that has 21 species. So these are groups that actually, they made it to the island, and on the top of that, they were able to diversify within this island. That would be the potential cases of adaptive radiation. You know? And this actually has been some of the cases. This is one example, this genus Tetragnatha in Hawaii, which actually has been shown, as we were saying before with all these lizards, that in this particular case, these are different islands. The colors are different islands. No, sorry. The colors are different color patterns. These are different coloration of the spiders. Basically, what it shows you that, you know, different colors evolve independently in each of the island. Okay. So that again would be a case of adaptive radiation. And that would be a case of parallel evolution. So basically, what I want to talk about now is I want to show you some examples of some groups we have been working with in the context of adaptive radiation. So what is adaptive radiation, what is not, and what's the speciation mechanism of some groups that we have been working on in different island systems. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples from Hawaii, from Juan Fernandez and the Canary Islands. Okay, so they're more or less spread around the world. So going back to this relationship between diversification and mechanisms of speciation, so I'm going to try to give you some examples of how idiosyncratic this connection is, at least for spiders. Okay, and I'm going to give you some examples, for example, of a case of non-adaptive radiation. A very nice case. That's pretty old already, you know. But it's I give that example. It's a work I did when I was postdoc in Hawaii a long time ago. But this actually has been shown up in some evolutionary textbooks, you know, as a textbook example of a non-adaptive radiation. So that's why I'm giving this example. So this is the genus Orsonwelles, and this is an endemic genus from Hawaii. It's a genus that was described by my colleague Gustavo Hormiga. He called it Orsonwelles because they are big and fat. Okay, and there are these guys. So this is my hand. 20 years ago, I lost that actually. So this is the guy. So this is a huge spider. This is a Lineae. The family Lineae. In English, Lineae are called dwarf spiders, minute spiders. These guys are huge. Okay, they're this big. Well, anyway, so that happened only once. So the whole genus is gigantic. And actually, when you look at the phylogeny, the only thing these guys have been doing is jumping from one island to the other and speciating. So there's no ecological adaptation here other than the original gigantism for whatever reason that we don't understand and we don't know. I mean, basically, these guys are just jumping from island to island. They are diversifying in the all islands, but that's just a typical allopatric speciation. So they are actually in different ranges, mountain ranges that are separated. So there's nothing. I mean, it's adaptive in the sense that they're still surviving, but there's nothing adaptive in the mechanism of isolation and eventually speciation in this group. But we also may have adaptive radiation, but which is not linked strictly to ecological speciation. And that would be an example of that. We're still in Hawaii. This is different, another endemic genus. This is Hawaiica. This is a salticid, you know. Salticids are very cool spiders. You know, they're nice, have big eyes, they look at you, and they're kind of like cool, you know. The nice thing of salticids is that they have a very complex courtship behavior, actually. So a male, basically, have you actually looked this, have you seen this is there all over in Facebook and the internet, the peacock spider. This spider actually that pops up the abdomen and it opens like flaps. This is a salticid. Well, not all of them do these very sophisticated things, but most of them they have a very sophisticated courtship behavior. The male move the legs, and they have all these patterns in the face, the clipeus, that the female actually seems to be selected. So this seems to be character under selection. So we actually we define, doesn't matter the species, we define like 3 different morphotypes. It has to do with the face, let's call it, of the male and the female. And that seems to be involved in courtship behavior, okay? So if we do the same thing as before, and we build a phylogeny for this particular trait, you have here the distribution of the different phenotypes, okay? But if you look at the phylogeny, that only happened once. Each of these morphotypes, it didn't evolve independently in each island. It just evolved once at the base of the tree. What you have is that the guys have been jumping from island to island, okay? And the funny thing is that the combination in each island is not random. This is just an approximation of the size of the 2 morphotypes, okay? And you can always see that one of the morphotypes is bigger than the other one. And it's always the same. So basically what happens is that for some reason at the beginning of that, there was this diversification into big and small ones. And after that, the evolutionary history is just about jumping from island to island again, okay? Another example of sexual selection is in this particular group. This is in the Canary Islands, in Micronesia. These are Folcus. These are the guys that you can find in old houses, and when we don't clean a lot, kind of like the ceilings, they are at the corners, the long leg spiders, like this one over here. So these guys are also well known to have sexual selection. In this case, it's some kind of like lock and key mechanism of the male and the female genitalia. So this would be one of the palps of the male. As I don't know if you remember, but male spiders don't have a penis. They have like a secondary copulatory structure in the palps. That's what they use to transfer sperm. In this case, I mean, all the species are differ in this kind of in these characters that are related with the lock and key system. What we found in this case is that most of the diversification was very fast and very recent, which would be like compatible with this like a strong sexual selection as a speciation mechanism. So now the question is do we actually have any good example or potential good example of adaptive radiation which is linked to ecology as a speciation mechanism? So that would be like like the paradigmatic example of adaptive radiation. And we think we do have at least one example. We're still working on that. This is work in progress. And it's a place we have been started working like the last 3 years, which is Juan Fernandez Archipelago in Chile. This is the Robinson Crusoe Islands, okay? In fact, it's a very nice story because these are 2 islands. I'll show you the islands now. So these are 2 islands in Chile, 600 kilometers off the coast of Valparaiso. So these islands were called originally Mas Afuera and Mas Adentro, okay, which is not especially exciting. And then the Chilean government realized that the islands were where William Dafoe actually put Robinson Crusoe. Actually, Robinson Crusoe is based in a real character, Alejandro Selkirk, a Scottish sailor that was marooned in these islands. So like 15 years ago, I think the Chilean government decided to change the name, and now they're called Robinson Crusoe and Alejandro Selkirk instead of Mas Afuera, Mas Adentro, so just for touristic reasons. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about this particular genus. This is the genus Lamina cauda. This is the same family as the big, fat Orson Welles I told you before. But again, that would be like a continental example. Small, tiny, brownish, boring spider, okay? They are distributed all over South America, about 41 species. And the nice things for us is that they colonize the Robinson Crusoe Islands, the Juan Fernandez Archipelago up here. And they also colonize Tristan da Cunha, which is a couple of islands in the middle of nowhere around here, okay? So it's a very nice example also to test some of our hypotheses about island evolution. So this is the Juan Fernandez Archipelago. It's the minimum of an archipelago, so there are 2 islands, basically. This is Robinson Crusoe, and this is Alejandro Selkirk. This is the small, tiny Santa Clara, which basically it was connected to Robinson Crusoe. It's about 600 kilometers from Valparaiso. So this is Selkirk. This is Robinson Crusoe. Very different islands. This one is much older. This one is about about 4 million years. This is much younger. So the island is still like in a very young stage. Still like eroding, but still like the typical volcanic island you will expect, kind of like the Chinese hat kind of island. The thing is that they are pretty far away one from the other, about almost 200 kilometers. So these just have some pictures of the islands, beautiful subtropical islands. There's only one village, permanent village in Robinson Crusoe, and there's one temporal one in Alejandro Selkirk. Still, they manage to do a lot of damage because they have goats, and they don't want to get rid of the goats because the only thing they do is fishing and chasing goats. So, but anyway, and they're destroying quite a bit of the ecosystem. But still, if you go up to the mountains, it's pretty nice there. And it's kind of like funny to go and sample. I mean, it's an interesting sociological experience to go there to sampling. But anyway, that's a different story. So these are the continental Laminacaudas, small, brownish spiders doing all the same thing, which is basically doing small, tiny sheet webs very close to the leaf litter, usually close to the streams. And almost 35 continental species do all of them exactly the same thing. Then you go to Juan Fernandez, and they go completely mad. They go completely crazy. They do any kind of thing you can imagine for a spider, standards, of course. So these are there's nine endemic species in these islands. 3 of them actually, again, are a case of giantism, so huge ligniphids, I mean, this big. But all of them are extremely different ecologically, phenotypically, sorry, but also ecologically. And one of the most surprising things, I know that for you guys that you are not too used to spiders, that maybe, okay, whatever. For a spider guy, I mean, just seeing these guys doing this kind of webs is amazing, okay? So remember this kind of like tiny sheet webs on the leaf litter? These guys go all over. They go on trees, on the tree trunks, actually doing this kind of like vertical webs. And the most amazing thing is some of them seems to be, they stop building webs altogether. So it's just like walking around, okay? So that's, I mean, for me, that's the most amazing example in spiders of ecophenotypic diversification. The other amazing thing that has happened with some of these guys, especially the big ones, is that would be like a continental face of one of these guys. So this is a chelicerae, very small, the jaws. But look at this guy over here, huge chelicerae with lots of teeth. We think that that's kind of an adaptation to feed on terrestrial amphipods. Because, I mean, if you get into the forest at night and you turn on your light, and it's the whole floor starts like boiling, it's full of amphipods, full of them, actually. There's other amazing adaptations. I mean, some of the spiders, I mean, that would be like a regular, standard Laminacauda kind of thing with short legs. I mean, there are things that has huge legs, And we suspect that be related with the fact that these guys go arachnophagic. I mean, this is a typical phenotypic shape of a spider that fits another spider. Long legs, to keep the spider, I mean, to hold the spiders far from the body when it's manipulated. So basically, we just build a phylogeny of these guys. We show that these guys actually are not monophyletic. So that was an amazing case. Things that have been identified as the same genus, they turn out to be 2 different things. Some of the species are more related to another genus, it's called Neomaso, and some others are all together, but there are 2 independent colonizations. And these blue ones, we are only referring to one of the islands, to Robinson Crusoe. The other island has only been colonized once, and by something which is not related with Robinson Crusoe. It was independently colonized from the continent, and nothing has happened here. This guy is doing exactly the same thing they were doing in the continent. I think that has to do with the fact that they are very recent. I mean, they just arrived probably less than 1 million years ago. These guys probably arrived there about 4 million years ago, and they go crazy, completely crazy. The funny thing is that, and that would be a proof of a rapid evolution, there is no resolution at this base whatsoever. So basically, you have all these species coming up from exactly the same point. This was done with regular Sanger sequencing, so we only have like five genes here. So we decided that, well, maybe that's a problem that we don't have enough genes. So we're just going to try to resolve that. So we went transcriptomics. We did here we did some transcriptomic analysis. We have 5,000 genes here, and still no resolution. So for us, this is an example of rapid radiation. I mean, it's so fast that there was no time to fix, diagnostic characters. And this is some of the things I was telling you. So these guys over here, this turns out to be a completely different genus than the main Laminacauda radiation. Okay, but if you look at these guys, I mean, expert like the Gustavo Hormiga, who's doing that with me, which is the world expert on these guys, he actually identified these guys as belonging to the other genus. And the thing is that if you look at this trait I was telling you, it's exactly the same all over. And these are the guys of the Laminacauda radiation. This is the other guy that turned out to be from a different radiation. And that's a completely different issue. This is an endemic one from Tristan da Cunha on the other side, on the Atlantic, and it again has exactly the same adaptation. So for us, this is a very strong case of a convergence evolution. But now the point here was that, is that related to, I mean, isn't this particular case diversification related to ecological speciation? Well, we don't have really proof of that, but what we have is that everything, all what I have showed you, these 9 species, they are all happening here. In this part of the island, there is only the wet forest is, we're talking about 10 kilometers from here to here. So it's a small, tiny place. And if you go to each locality, this is the number of species you find in each locality. All of them live together. All of them live together. I mean, I found it really difficult to imagine a situation where actually these things can diversify in isolation, really. And in this particular case, it doesn't have to have any kind of sexual selection, at least nothing that has been recognized as having some kind of courtship or anything related with that. It may have something related with the genitalia, but we don't have an example of that. So basically, that would be the only case I can present to you that there are chances that ecology may be involved or natural selection may be involved in the actual speciation mechanism. For sure, it's involved in the diversification, probably through competition. Okay, so now for, are we doing in time? Yeah, fine. Okay, so now just to finish it, I'm actually going to put on the table something we are working right now. So that's going to be like work in progress. So here I'm going to try to throw some ideas of things that we are testing with a new system. No, it's not a new system for us, but it's going to be new in my talk now. And so we're now going to the Canary Islands. Okay, we're getting close to home. Probably you guys all know what the Canary Islands. We have 7 main islands, Lanzarote and Fuerteventura close to Morocco. The rest of the islands across this kind of like line, which is a gradient of closeness or closeness to the continent, but also more importantly of age. The older islands are on the east, and they become younger towards the west. And again, we have a pretty good dating of the origin of these islands, so we know more or less when things happen, when evolutionary processes and ecology happen there. So we have been working for over 25 years on this group over here. This is a genus called Disdera, and that was the genus that I did my PhD, so I'm kind of like going back to the origins. This is a bunch of species. These guys are completely crazy. So basically, we have about 55 endemic species in the Canaries. This is also a very diverse group in the continent. There are about 200 species in the continent. They are mostly circum-Mediterranean, and they managed to colonize the Canaries. They also colonized Madeira, Azores, and Cape Verde. But only the Canaries, they went like, completely mad. So basically, what we're working right now, that's our current project, is about testing if this is a case of an adaptive radiation, and also trying to understand what are the mechanisms driving this speciation again. So basically, the same topics I was telling you about, now we're trying to test that more accurately in this particular system. So just to set up the evolutionary framework that we have here, so this is the Canaries over here. I told you they colonized all the Micronesian archipelagos, but only the Canaries, they went mad. We have about 55 species. What we know phylogenetically speaking is that, all the ones from the Western Canaries, when I say Western Canaries, I say from Gran Canaria to La Palma, all the guys over there are monophyletic. So it's a single evolutionary event. We're talking about 45 species, so that certainly is a proliferation of species. 45 species that probably diversify within the Western islands. Then we have 10 species in the Eastern Canaries, okay? And then all these two things seems to be closely related to all the species that we can find in the Western Mediterranean, which is about 85 species, okay? We still have not resolved if these two guys are monophyletic, meaning if the Canaries were colonized once or they were colonized twice, one in the Eastern, one in the Western. But anyway, we are now very interested in working in this particular group over here, trying to understand how come 45 species evolve in this particular island system. So the first thing is asking yourself, that's going to be a case of adaptive radiation. We have to ask if actually the phenotypic diversity we see is related with, is adapted to some kind of like ecological, or is under some kind of ecological selection. And my answer would be like, yes, that's the kind of thing we are testing, so I'm going to try to convince you that this is the case. So what you have represented here, that would be one of these data running after a wood louse. And the thing is that these data is usually, when you read any kind of like field guide, they always say like this data specializes in feeding on wood lice, okay? And this is what you see here, and this is true up to a point. Because what we know right now, and this is some work that was done by a colleague, by Milan Resak from the Czech Republic, he showed that actually within this area, within the genus, these 250 species, you may have both generalist species and specialized species. I'm talking about now feeding, okay, about predators. And the thing is that if you look at the chelicerae, if you look at the jaws, you can actually guess, out of the shape of the jaw, you can guess what are they feeding on. So there's a special kind of jaw that will characterize the generalist ones, and then you have the ones that will be characterized the specializer, the ones that specialize on feeding in wood lice. And the funny thing is actually they have different shapes because they have different strategies to feed on different kind of wood lice. Because wood lice, as you know, some of them actually roll to defend themselves, but some others like cling, some others just stick to the substrate, and some others run like hell, Okay? So depending what they do, and that would be this is a taxonomically conserved strategy, you will have different adaptations. So you have the pincers, the forks, and the keys. So these are definitions of different kind of jaws that they'll be used to attack isopods in a different way. Okay? That was described in the continent. That was described with the continental Dysdera. It turned out that when you go to the Canaries, you may find all these different phenotypes. Okay? We have, that would be the ones I showed you before. These are continental species, and these are the Canarian species. And you may find examples of species that correspond exactly to this kind of pattern. We have the generalis, we have the pincers, the forks, and the keys. All of them are present in the Canaries. And because the Canaries are monophyletic, we know that they evolve independently from the ones in the continent. But then you may ask, well, maybe, it's kind of like funky. You're just comparing things, comparando cromos, I would say in Spanish. Well, that's probably true. So we actually have conducted some prey preference experiments to see actually if these guys with these particular jaw types, they actually fit on, or they prefer different kind of preys. And this seems to be the case. So you can actually identify, you can actually relate these shapes with, preference to feeding on different kind of isopods or feeding with things that are not isopods. Okay? I have to say, isopods are not a very appreciated food for most arthropods. Okay? They have a lot of repugnatory glands. They kind of defend themselves. They accumulate a lot of heavy metals, so they are very toxic. So there are not so many guys that actually feed on isopods. So this kind of specialization involves not only morphology, it also involves physiology. So yeah, there's a relationship between prey preference and this kind of shape. As I was telling you before, because we have a phylogeny, we can actually trace that on the phylogeny, try to see if actually that evolved once or evolved independently. For sure, it evolved independently between the continent and the islands. But we know that even within the islands, there will be 3 examples of the evolution of this particular, which is the most extreme phenotypic character, which is this kind of like short and flat fang of the chelicerae, that it would be used actually to feed on the isopod by putting the fang between the tergites of the isopod. So that evolved at least 3 times independently in the Canaries, and it also evolved 2 times independently in the continent. So for sure, that's an adaptation. That's an ecophenotypic adaptation to feed on. So now the next question is, I was telling you at the beginning of the talk, is that up to what point these 2 things relate? Is speciation related with diversification, or there are 2 different things? First, you speciate, and then you adapt, or you diversify ecophenotypically. Okay, that would be the big things. Are these 2 things independent? Are they coupled? My hypothesis is that these 2 things are not coupled, that we have chances for speciation, and then once you have a speciate, then you diversify ecologically. So let me tell you, why, and again, this is the kind of thing we're trying to test right now. That's the kind of the thing we are doing right now. But I can give you some insights why I think this is the way to go. First of all, I think there's a lot of opportunities for classical allopatric speciation, at least at 2 different levels. At the general island level, this is a kind of a graphic representation of the islands. So we have Lanzarote, Fuerteventura, Gran Canaria, Tenerife, Gomera, Palma, and El Hierro. The size is proportional to the number of endemic species we have in these islands. And then the ones on black are species that actually are shared by one island. Okay? So actually, we can see here there's a lot of cases of species that are present in more than one island. If you look at the genetics of the species, they can be considered different species. They're genetically divergent, but phenotypically they are still not different. Okay? So that would be a case where actually we may have things that are already different species because they are not exchanging genes anymore, and that has been going on for a long time, more than 1 million years in some cases, but still they're doing exactly the same ecological role. Okay? So nothing has changed, the adaptation is still the same, these guys keep doing the same thing. But even within one island, we may have a lot of possibilities of generating some kind of allopatric divergence. I will call it microallopatry just for the sake of having a name. And this is an example in Tenerife, okay, one of the big islands. So Tenerife, which is about 12 million years old, for example, we know that the easternmost and the westernmost part of Tenerife, El Teno and Anaga, they probably arise as 2 independent islands that were not connected at the beginning. They were subsequently, about 2 million years ago, after the volcanic episodes of the Cañadas del Teide and the current Teide, they got connected. Okay? A part of that, we know, for example, they have like major landslides. Usually in volcanic islands, because they grow so fast, they are very unstable. And basically, what you have after the building episode is like you have like huge blocks of the island that just collapse, that just slide down you know, and you get these huge, they're called valleys. You know, you go to Tenerife and you say El Valle de la Orotava, the Orotava Valley. Well, the Orotava Valley is not a valley. It's not an erosion valley. It's just a piece of the island that we just went down to the sea. Okay, and this actually has had some impact on the phylogeography of some of the species that are widespread in the island. Just to give you an example, this would be what we call the macra complex. There are 3 different species involved here. And you can see basically that, you know, if you look at the phylogeography, this is just a mitochondrial DNA, but if you look at the pattern of the mitochondrial DNA, it fits perfectly with some of these regions I was telling you. So this certainly, there was some kind of population structuring going on, which is due to strictly allopathic processes. Another source of a speciation mechanism which is not strictly related with natural selection would be sexual selection. So the next question would be like, is sexual selection going on in these rare species? These rare don't have any kind of like, they are not very polite when they want to mate, you know? They just jump into it and they go for, you know, so no presents, no dancing, nothing. But they are well known by another thing, that they are one of the best work examples of what is called female cryptic selection. So female genitalia is actually extremely complex. They have a lot of diverticles, there's a lot of different glands, and it seems that the females are able to select, to mate actually with different males and select what sperm they're going to use for that. Okay? So there may be chances for sexual selection, at least at the female level. For the males, it seems that the intromitant apparatus, I mean the pulp, you know, what they use to transfer the male, it may be subject to some kind of antagonistic evolution with the female. Okay, so there may be chances for that. Now, when you look at the Canarian Disdera species, what you can find, and this is very interesting, is that there's a certain trend towards simplification in the genitalia, both of the females and the males. And I will show you what I mean by simplification. Okay, but the interesting thing, and that's something that we're trying to test right now using geometric morphometrics, is if actually genitalia is evolving faster or more slowly than morphological characters. Because if your expectation is that you may have sexual selection plays an important role, then you will expect genitalia characters changing faster than somatic characters. Well, if the other way around, if this is mostly driven for some kind of natural selection, you will expect the other pattern. You will expect somatic characters changing faster than genitalic characters. Well, I don't want to get any detail, but that kind of thing we are testing now is we're trying to come up with some kind of measure of complexity in these guys. Here you have a vulva. That would be like the internal genitalia of a female. That's a lateral view. And you have all these different diverticles and different places where the sperm can be stored and pieces and different levels of sclerotization. You can actually see that in the Canaries, most of the species, they lost some of these diverticles. They reduced the sclerotization, so there's certain simplification going on. The same happened with this is the male pulp. This is the intromitant organ, the copulatory organ. And again, this is the most complex one with a lot of different sclerites. It also seems that some of these sclerites are lost in some of the species, okay? So we have, and that's, again, this is just intuition. We're trying to test that. It seems that, there's a reduction in the complexity of these organs that would go against sexual selection. And the last thing we think, or the last mechanism that we think that may be involved in a speciation is not related with natural selection, is chromosomal rearrangement, what we call chromosomal speciation. As you know, there's some, this has been demonstrated, at least for butterflies and other organisms, that and that's usually related to allocentric chromosomes, so chromosomes that, they don't have a centromere, so basically they can recombine across the chromosome about the homologous pair. It has been shown that, that some of these species actually, they evolve very fast, the chromosome evolves very fast. They may have like rearrangements, they may have like breakage of the arms of chromosomes. And actually, more species may be actually, or speciation may be actually driven by this kind of isolation, of genetic isolation. This is a completely different example. This is another Disdera. This is Disdera actually from the continent. This is the Disdera erythrina complex, this is the distribution. And I'm putting this example, there's something, that's a model we worked some years ago, where actually we could demonstrate that there is, first, that there's a lot of chromosomal number diversity, just chromosomal number. We found, this is 19, 11, 15. I think, now I have to recall that, but this is male. Males are, so the sex determination is X0 for males. Okay, so I think this is the number of chromosomes of the male, yeah, because it's uneven. So that would be the number of chromosomes of the male. So you can see there's a lot of variability, 19, 11, 7, 13, 15, 11. And actually even some of the groups which are very closely related, very low diversity, they change completely the number of chromosomes, okay? And again, we show, using both nuclear and mitochondrial data, that, the populations with the same kind of rearrangement, they're all monophyletic. So, they're not exchanging. There's no exchange between different chromosomal types. Well, that was shown in the continent. Now, we're starting to recover chromosomal information in the Canaries. We start just starting. We have some figures. But it seems that some closely related species seems to differ in the number of chromosomes, sorry. Okay, so that may be another potential source of speciation in these guys. So the question is, okay, if speciation is not driven by natural selection, how these guys are diversifying ecophenotypically, okay? And our working hypothesis is that's because of course, because of competition, because of interspecific competition. And we think that may happen at two different levels. It may happen at the character displacement level, or it may happen about the competitive exclusion level. That is, the actual character may be changing just because of competition, or the characters change for whatever other reason, and then basically what's happening is there's a filtering, of the combination of different species that can live together. And we have examples of both things so far, okay? Again, this is not quantitative, this is just some kind of relationship that I would like to show you. First of all, this guy over here, this is one of the Canarian Disdera. I don't know if you can see it, but this is completely blind. There's no eyes. Because, at least 8 different species of Disdera in the Canaries have become cave adapted. They have adapted to caves, okay? Basically, you have here, could be like a morphospace of the trilobitic species. We know from the phylogeny that all of them evolve into caves independently, okay? Each of them is an independent case of adaptation to caves. And if you look at the morphospace, that would be like a PCA of measurements, of linear measurements, you can see that they segregate perfectly. So basically, things living together in the same cave, they tend to be differently, phenotypically, okay? So there's some kind of competition going on there, for sure. Oh, that's a nice one. That's a different. So the other thing we can look at, that we're talking about the different kinds of chelicerae, different shapes of chelicerae. If we trace off differences, we have to see that most of them actually evolve. Some of them evolve independently. Other ones evolve just once. But the distribution of these different kinds of phenotypes across the different islands is, in a way, actually, in a single island, you will always have different kinds of jaws living together. Okay, so they will probably segregating potential prey. And then we also have, and that I'm going to finish with that, a potential case of competitive exclusion. Now we're talking about things that they are already different, and what's happening is that one is actually driving the other one away. Okay, this is a speculation, but it's kind of fun. I've tried to put that in a paper a couple of times, and they always rejected it me. But I still have, I still think I have a point. So I'm going to show you about that. So now we're jumping into the Eastern Canaries. I didn't talk about that very much, but anyway, there's different endemic species in the Eastern Canaries. There are few of them because the Eastern Canaries are more drier, they are lower, so there's less ecological heterogeneity. But if we go to Lanzarote, we have 2 species living together. And the nice thing of these 2 species is that even if they are closely related, we know that they evolve independently. They are not each other's sister species, okay? Probably one of them actually evolved in Fuerteventura and then jump into Lanzarote. The case is that now they are completely sympatric. They co-occur in the same place. You turn up one stone, the 2 of them are there sitting. This over here, this is a phenogram of similarity. It's just a morphological similarity. It turned out that these 2 species that are not related, they're very, 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 very similar. And still they are living together. So, that goes against our hypothesis of competitive, of prey segregation in a species that lives together. So our expectation here would be like, it cannot be. So that's an unstable system where actually one has to drive the other way away from these ecosystems. So what we first think is that what we publish is we look at the phylogeography of these guys. Do they have the same phylogeographic pattern? And the answer is no, they're completely different. So this is a network, an haplotypic network of one of the species. This is an haplotypic network of the other species. If you look at that, they are completely different. These guys over here are philopatric. Each population has their own haplotypes. They're all very similar. They have this kind of like almost star-like shape. And basically that's a very kind of like a meta-population dynamic. Okay, so basically you have like short-lived populations that then disappear and they're colonized again and they start a new diversity again. While these guys have huge population sizes, they're all over the islands, they exchange, they move around. It seems that they always have like much bigger population sizes. My hypothesis here was that one is actually driving the other one away. When it's actually, when the situations are, prey are scarce, one actively will not chase out, but will feed on the other one. That was my explanation. That was what was rejected from the paper. So what we did then, okay, let's not try to test if one may be actually eating the other in certain situations. And what will be the expectation? Well, we move to our stable isotopes, try to see if one actually is in a higher level trophic than the other one, okay? And this is very preliminary, but what we have is that in most of this would be one of the species, that's the other one. These are populations where actually, or locations where actually they overlap. And in most of the cases, you can see that this is males and females, one of the species is actually above the other one. And it's not always, but you have the blue here and the green here. It seems that one of them seems to be above the trophic level of the other one. This, of course, is not the evidence that one is feeding on the other one, but, it gives you to think at least, and makes me happy. Okay, so just to finish, and sorry for the long time it took me, as a take-home message, I would say species proliferation facilitated by both species heterogeneity, space heterogeneity, and open niche ability would be like a general pattern. My experience, my data shows that most of the cases, adaptive radiations are the result of post-speciation adaptation, post-speciation diversification, and probably mostly driven by interspecific competition. And the other thing is that, this seems to be a lot of idiosyncratic evolution going on here. So probably there's a lot of the organismal traits that may explain you what would be your expectations for these particular situations. Well, anyway, just to finish, I want to thank some of the people I've been working on with this in these different projects I explained you. This is Rosie Gillespie, who was my co-advisor, my postdoc advisor, and we've collaborated a lot in Hawaiian taxa. This is Gustavo Hormiga, which is a researcher in George Washington University. We're working together in Juan Fernandez. This is Nuria Macias. She was a former PhD student of mine, and now we're working together in the Canaries. If you guys are interested in more information, you can visit our lab website. And just before I finish, we're organizing the next meeting of the Wildlife Society in Barcelona next year. So if any of you it's up for, we'll be waiting for you. You're invited to come over on September next year. And thank you for your attention. Sorry.